All right, students, welcome to my second book talk of the year as your librarian. I'm going to take you through three different books. You might have heard of these before, you might have not. But my big question, honestly, for you is: are you just tired of reading books that don't reflect the lives of people you know and don't seem to talk about real issues? Are you looking to read something that touches upon current events and challenging topics that even adults are trying to navigate? I want you to look no further if your answer to any of those questions was yes, because I'm going to talk to you about three books. We have The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, All American Boys by Brendan Keeley and Jason Reynolds, and Jada's Diary by Joe Cabey. And I just want to let you know, like, it gets very real in these books. So, I'm presenting this information to you because I know that you can handle it. And I know that you're hungry to learn about and read about um, experiences that real people in this world go through. So, all three of these titles that are pictured here, they center the experiences of young people of color. And all three have protagonists that are dealing with really challenging issues such as police brutality, navigating relationships with people who have a different racial and cultural background than you, navigating relationships across different socioeconomic backgrounds, and in the last book's case, rape. These topics are challenging, and perhaps you feel like the adults in your life don't always know how to discuss these topics with you, or even how to help you navigate things you're thinking about in relation to these topics. I believe that these books are definitely going to spark some conversation and thoughts in your mind to better prepare you to navigate issues that maybe you are going through yourself or people you know and love are going through. So, we're going to start with talking about Hate You Give. And I'm going to talk you through each of those books to try to convince you that you want to read really good books about real people dealing with real issues. I imagine. I don't want to assume, but I imagine that might be the case for you. So, the first book, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So, the protagonist of this story is named Star Carter. She's a 16-year-old Black girl. The community that she comes from is lower on the socioeconomic spectrum than the community where she goes to school. She goes to an elite private school in a predominantly white and affluent part of her city. She is she witnesses one of her closest and oldest friends be killed by police officers, a young black kid, young black boy named Khalil. She experiences this tragic, traumatic event. And the whole story is about how she navigates her pain, but also speaks out and demands justice for Khalil and becomes a leader in her community. So, as I was mentioning, like, strengths of this book are youth activism, how to respond to oppression, how to center community in your life when you're going through something really challenging, or an injustice. And then it's written from the perspective of someone that's probably around your age. She's 16 years old. And this book is definitely going to spark conversation and thoughts about police brutality, racial injustice, systemic racism, and just generally how young people can respond when seeing um, instances of police brutality, particularly targeted at people of color, men of color, often, how to respond to that injustice. So, if you don't believe me, I just want to highlight some amazing acclaim about this book. So, these are some really amazing quotes about how incredible this book is. As you can see, it's won a bunch of awards. And I'll just highlight the last one. It's topical, urgent, necessary. And if that weren't enough, it's a highly entertaining and engaging read. Okay. This book is also a movie. So if you're one of those students who's like, I really like to watch the movie version after I read a book, Amandla Stenberg does an amazing job portraying Star in this movie adaptation. Highly recommend. So the next book I'm going to talk about is called All American Boys. This book is by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. It centers the story of two protagonists. One is Rashad, he's a 16-year-old black teenager, and Quinn, who's a 16-year-old white teenager. Um, the story centers around Rashad, who is a victim of police brutality, and the police brutality that Rashad experiences, Quinn witnesses. He's there for it. So this book centers around showing the perspectives of each of these characters navigating this event and how the two of them experience this event in very different ways because of their racial identity. Strengths of this book: youth activism again, particularly like activism that athletes can engage in, how to respond to oppression and violence, community. As I said, two perspectives that go back and forth, sharing the experiences of people from different racial groups. And it'll definitely spark a conversation about police brutality, racial injustice, and systemic racism. And again, if you don't trust me, if you don't want to take my word for it, this book has also won a ton of awards, as you can see on the cover. And it's such a timely book that will help you think about what you can do to combat instances of police brutality. Because as we know, this is something that continues to go on in this country. And we all want to be thinking about how we can stop it. This book does not have a movie yet, and I couldn't find any plans for it. So if you're one of those movie students, like I mentioned, I hope that you read it anyway. And if you're super into watching something, I did find a video on the Library of Congress website, which is an interview with both of these authors talking to students like you, your age, about the issues in the book. The last book I'm going to highlight is called Jada's Diary. So I'm trying to sell you on this too. And I'm going to be honest, I felt like I couldn't leave this book out, but it's a Bildungsroman book. That's a genre. I might have pronounced that incorrectly, but I hope I didn't. And it's a coming of age story about Jada White, who's a 16-year-old Black girl growing up in the Bronx and just navigating growing up, trying to be successful in school, manage expectations that other people have for her. And it's an incredible story. I will say that it does cover really, really, really intense topics that are difficult to read about, like rape and trauma and abuse. I did include it here, but I do want to make sure that you check in with your caregiver to make sure they are comfortable with you reading this book. Some strengths of it: how to respond to trauma, again, how to center community in your life. It's a first person perspective. And it really does a wonderful, beautiful job talking about how to move on from your past or your home without forgetting where you came from. So this book is definitely not as well known as the other two. And when I, as your librarian, was trying to find some quotes to hook you into the idea this is an amazing book, I couldn't find much. It came out in 2020 and it's not as popular as the other two. But there were a ton of Goodreads reviews about how awesome this book is, how well written it is, and how real it is. So I wanted to put those there for you that you can read through. I know we talked about Goodreads at the beginning of the year and how it's a great resource for you to find books that you're interested in and to see what other people are thinking about books that you might want to read. But there's some acclaim from some passionate Goodreads reviewers. And then, as I mentioned, right, like this is not a very well-known book yet. I think it will become one. But there is no plans for a movie version of it, a TV version of it, or any kind of recording. So I put that question mark there because maybe after you read it, you will be inspired to direct your own. Who knows? So here are the titles. I hope you will consider reading these three awesome books that again center the experiences of young Black protagonists who are dealing with real world issues.